What's going on? So today I am just taking some time to really make a video about a question that I get a lot in our world, and that's how am I tracking our ISAs? What do our KPIs look like? What does success look like? And what do I do with the information after I've received it? So what I've got here is a just super zoomed in view on our weekly tracker. So a lot of people are using, some form of this in some sort, or they're all the way into a third party. Sisu would be a great example of that. That's sisu.co. We're big champs for Sisu. We've been really happy with their product. And we use it in addition to stuff that we build off of our own tracker, which is a whole nother video that I can get into as to why we do that. But what you're looking at now is my weekly ISA tracker. I say weekly, it's a daily ISA tracker. And zoomed in here, you can see my slot here. We have a slot for every single ISA on the team. So I want to start by just covering what our metrics look like week over week. And so when I talk about metrics, Eric Hatch said something really impactful to me a couple of years ago at a summit. We both were speaking to our team about where we were going for the year. This was midway through 2020. And Eric's ideology, his guiding true north, if you will, was that if we were going to win at a very large scale moving forward, we needed to win across 3 domains, and those domains were people, process, and product. And I think our ISA tracking system and how we go about tracking ISA output realistically really achieves that across those 3 major domains. And so what I want to focus on here is the product, and we're going to move into process and people as well. So the ISA tracker, we have a set of KPIs here, and this is kind of our North Star when it comes to our day-to-day. So the first is calls attempted, right? This is the baseline of how we're measuring anything in our world. This is the show of effort, if you will, and the number one, if I see that we're not hitting numbers as a department or one of my ISAs is struggling, this is the first thing I go to. As many attempts as you make, those are your swings. You got to have those. The second is priority notifications. Now, this is one that has popped up in probably the last year and a half when we really onboarded into YLOPO in a serious fashion. Also, Sierra, if you're on Sierra, Sierra does priority notifications as well. And this is really more of this is almost a barometer where your pipeline's at, right? The more priority notifications you have, the more your pipeline is in action and moving. Those priority notifications, for those of you that might not be on those platforms, are basically, they're kind of a wide stretch of different things. Maybe somebody comes back and revisits the website after so many days of not having used the website at all. That would trigger a priority notification. If somebody requested a tour, if somebody has viewed a certain property, 123 Main Street, number of... Those are kind of the big 3 that come to mind right away. Or new registration that came in on a specific property. I think that's one that fires as well. This isn't a KPI that we necessarily have a ton of control over because it's in the basis of consumer behavior. However, what it does do is allows us to see holistically, like, hey, you got a lot of priority notifications. Your pipeline is really popping. Let's take a look at how many A's do you have right now? How many of those priority notifications are coming out of your A's, your B's, your C's, your D's? If you're seeing that a lot of them are in A's, okay, hey, it's time to harvest, man. You start going through, start booking those for appointments. If I'm seeing that they're B's, C's, and D's, one, we still want to harvest them. Right? We want to get in front of those because it's based on consumer behavior, but it also gives me a little bit of notification to say, okay, let's actually take a look at your B's, C's, and D's because you might have some things misattributed through your pipeline based on timeline, and maybe people's timelines are changing, and maybe you need to create some new views on your pipeline as a consequence. Mass contacts attempted. So this used to be more around email for us when I first started with the company. Now it's a lot more based on texting. This one, we try our best to stay on top and get accurate numbers. For those of you that are using like Robbie's auto plans and things like that, like it's hard to really get a full holistic view of how many text messages are going out a day because obviously, at any given time in our pipeline, even just mine alone, you can have up to 100,000 messages going out in a single day. Like trying to stay on top of that is just almost impossible. Not impossible, but close to it. And I try to just keep track of these, and my team tries to just keep track of these as you're going through your inbox and stuff like that. You send a quick text, okay, try and mark it when you can. I've honestly considered getting rid of this one for that reason. It's just that it's become such a chore, but it's become a Gordian knot to try and stay on top of these. Conversations, that goes without saying. That's getting voice to voice or having an ongoing text conversation with an individual. Now, when we mark these conversations, if I'm talking to you, if I send an intro text, you text me back, that's one conversation for the rest of the conversation. I don't want to be marking, okay, text 1, text 3, that's not communications. That's just one conversation. We mark it as such. This is the pinnacle, right? If you're not getting voice to voice, or you're not communicating or getting text back, that tells us a lot of things. So that the outside of calls attempted, that's probably the biggest barometer of, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Do we need to rework the pipeline? Do we need to do more prospecting? And this is really where I can tell the health of your status, your long-term goals, based on, hey, are you getting voice with people? Following directly after that is follow-ups created. So if I see you're having 100 conversations and you're setting 10 follow-ups, we might have a serious problem. Now, this is dependent on the kind of lists that you're calling through or the different types of people you're communicating with. We have to do a little bit of investigative work when we're going through that to really just kind of parse what's going on there. But naturally, we want to see high conversations, high follow-ups. That means the pipeline's building. And this is my metric to know, hey, things are going well for you. Things are coming together, because if your pipeline's building, that means success later on down the road. Buy appointments and sell appointment set, that one's kind of self-explanatory. Buyer appointment set and seller appointment set. The next one is lead archived with plan and junk and DNC. We used to, back in the day before we really had a lot of the capabilities we had now, we used to use the term recycle. And basically a recycle meant they didn't necessarily tell us to kick rocks, but we need cool it with them. So we would put them in recycle. Maybe they were really far off, 2 to 3 years off. They would get set into a separate lead pool that was a lower tier lead pool for us to call through, but there you got there. You might be able to add some people to your pipeline a little bit. If they were 2 years when we first moved them there, they might be a year when you talk to them, or stuff like that. Now, because of some of the capability we have through YLOPO or retargeting or any of the other different third-party mechanisms or things that we built into our system, it's a little bit easier to stay on top of these folks. So when I say a lead archived with a plan, basically that means, hey, it's not a right now, it's probably not even a real soon opportunity, but it's going to be an opportunity down the road. So we're putting mechanisms in to stay on top of those folks. Robbie's Auto Plans would be a great. These would be the not interested, or the just bought, not interested. These are folks that we want to stay on top of because we can recapture them further on down the line. But right now, nothing's going to happen for you. So we don't want to sit there and babysit them or keep them in the pipeline. Now, that can all change in a heartbeat. Maybe they trigger a Y priority alert. You figure out they're looking at something else. That can be referrals. That can be second homes, lake homes in our area is a big one. But that's kind of what we mean when we talk about lead archived with plan. And then finally, junk DNC. These are people that basically that's reserved for, they told, don't ever contact me again, or I already have an agent. That's kind of the barometer. We want to make sure that those junk DNCs, we're keeping them in single digits or low double digits if you have like really high contact days. So this is the basis of how I evaluate, just at the cursory level, where my ISAs are at week over week. Now we're updating this real time every single day, every single week. Those numbers are getting sent to Sisu. There's a lot of people who ask like why we're not using Sisu for our daily tracking. Sisu does a good job for a lot of different tracking metrics. The benefit of having it all based here is twofold. One, this creates a feeling of competition amongst my team, right? If you use Jim and I, for example, Jim's looking at my numbers, I'm looking at his numbers. If I see he set 2 appointments and I'm only at 1 for the day, brings out that fire of competition. Also, holistically, it gives us a really clean, neat view of the entire team to know where we're at for a day. Whereas Sisu might be very, very good for historical data, maybe looking across, how are you this quarter versus how are you this week versus how are you today. The other big one is that I use our tracker for all kinds of 1,000 foot view information on our pipelines, and our lead spend and a lot of the other videos that I did like tack time or cycle time or lead time or any of these other KPIs that I'm using as a leader of an ISA department to really make informed decisions about how to pivot and how to strategize, those are all built off of this tracker. So we need something that's kind of our baseline, whereas pulling that data from Sisu, we're just not able to do it in the way that I would like. That being said, huge fan of Sisu, and I'm sure that they've been actually making a lot of leaps and bounds in the ISA department. So these capabilities might show up one day. If that were the case, and I could build other spreadsheets and fill in or pull data really easily from Sisu to do some of the things that I need to do, I might consider getting rid of our ISA tracker. But as it stands right now, this is where we're at. This is what's worked for us, and that's just kind of where we're going to stay for a while. So that kind of covers the product, right? The product being appointments, and the product being contacts and conversations, right? The things that make an ISA department run, the things that add directly to the bottom line. And next, we're going to talk about the process and people. So this is where we blend. So if I come over to this tab here, now this is the same sheet. I just opened it up in another tab. You're going to see two sets of numbers here. One, we have the whole life assessment average and the high performance habits average. Excuse me. So one of the things that we try to do really well at Hatch Realty is really take a holistic view of what are people doing? Why are your goals? What are you striving towards? You'll hear Eric use the language, we want to build runways. And this is one of the ways that I help build runways in our team. So we go through a pretty holistic goal setting exercise that I base off of the book High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard, which I very highly recommend if you're into looking for kind of a level up book coming into this next year. I think it's one of the better, I'm always hesitant to say self-help books that I've ever read, but that's the language I'll use for now. Very, very good book. And in that book, the High Performance Habits, Brendon Burchard identifies these habits, the high performance habits, or HP6, as you'll hear it sometimes called. Those habits are seek clarity, generate energy, raise necessity, increase productivity, develop influence, and demonstrate courage. Now, when you stack these habits on top of each other and you make big leaps and bounds across those habits, your goals are very, very tangible. They're very reachable, and it turns you into a very high-performance person, which is the basis of what that entire book's about, high performance habits. And so we do two major things. The first is every single Monday, and I'll show you here in a second, my team takes a assessment that measures them across these 6 habits. So the high performance habits assessment looks like this. And they fill out this form every single week. And these questions came directly from Brendon Burchard. I don't take credit for any of this. This is all his work. But within those high performance habits, so the first one here, we have seek clarity. He asks a couple clarifying questions, and this is one of the basics of what he talks about in the book when he talks about seeking clarity. So the first one, I was intentional in how I acted this week. You're going to rate yourself 1 to 5. I knew the feelings I wanted to generate this week. I stayed focused as much as I wanted to. I made this week meaningful, and I determined something I could get better at this week. You're going to take the sum of all those scores and multiply it by 4, and that gives you a percentage out of 100, right? And so they go through, and every single habit has its own individuals. I worked out this week for energy. I wound down well at night so I could sleep well. I was emotionally committed to excellence this week. Increasing productivity. I worked on things that matter. You kind of get the gist of what's going on here. But that's going to give us a score out of 100. And over time, I average that score. They take this test every week, including myself, and we kind of watch, what the trends look like. I can watch. We'll pick on Jim here for a second. If his seek clarity is at 82.9, and then I check it again next week, and I see we started moving down a little bit. Maybe we're at an 80, and that week after, it's a 70, 75, for example. I notice that there's a slide there. So we want to pay attention to this and say, Jim, what's been going on? Let's take a look at seeking clarity. Jim, have you been intentional in how you've been acting? Okay, give me some examples of when you have. Give me some examples of when you haven't. This is just a really quick tool for me to get on a granular level on things that maybe you don't always think to ask. And these are things that come up in our one-on-ones a lot. And we also bring these up in our team meetings as well. So we act as accountability partners for one another. This is a great tool, one, for staying intentional with your team, and getting a holistic picture, right? Because sales will only take you so far. I did a video last week or 2 weeks ago talking about burnout, right? This is one of the tools that I use to evaluate where my team's at and when we're approaching burnout, because as you're starting to see these scores drop, chances are good if you see one score drop, that's an easily remedied situation. If you're seeing all of those habit scores drop across the board, okay, now we're moving towards a problem. Something is really off kilter in your life, whether it's at home in your personal life, whether it's here at work. Something is not in alignment, and we need to address that. Then on the other side of the coin, we have the whole life assessment average. Now this is taken every single month. We take it on the first business day of the month. Now that measures you across several domains here: health, mental and emotional, partner and love, family, friends, mission, experiences, spirit, finances, and learning. Again, this is a really good holistic picture of where your life is at. If you've been in the inside sales game for a while, you know that this job never ends. Boundaries can be hard to establish depending on the infrastructure you have around. If you're a single person ISA team or a two-person ISA team, like I remember when it was the Jim and Cody show for a while, it's rough. It is really, really rough. And sometimes it's hard to, separate yourself from work. And we tend to just slap a band-aid and say, well, you just got to take a vacation. But that doesn't do it. A vacation will get you out of a pattern of behavior or a pattern or an environment that could be damaging. But if you're coming back to that same environment and nothing's changed, it's only a matter of time before you just repeat this cycle. And this is one way that we're able to just keep a really clear picture on where everything's at. So this whole life assessment, same kind of thing. The only difference is that you rate yourself on a 1 to 10. And these are Brendan Burchard's answers. So when an ISA first starts out, we have a new ISA that we've onboarded. He is just in the starting phase, the first lap, if you will. So when he goes through and takes this every month, these are the numbers and the definitions that we're using. Now for my team, I take them through a goal setting exercise, usually at the beginning of the year, and then again towards the close of the year, that kind of reevaluates and then also sets a pace for next year. And we make goals across all these different domains. So using Jim as an example, I'll sit down and I'll say, Jim, let's talk about health in the next year. What would a 10 out of 10 look like for you in health in this next year, right? I don't sleep as much as I said, so maybe it's getting some sleep, or maybe it's, hey, I'd like to exercise more, or I'd like to eat better. And then we start digging in, right? We do the ISA work. Okay, well, what does that mean? How will you know that you succeeded? And we start asking these questions to break it down until we get to the granular level of, hey, this is a really achievable goal. And then we help them work through, let's do a 1, 3, 5. Let's work through this to say, how do we actually get there? What are the steps that you need to take? What are the milestones? What are the tasks? Let's knock them all out. So moving forward, throughout the year, once we have this full list and we go through health, mental, emotional, partner, love, family, and for some of these, they might not have a ton of goals. Like I have one of my ISAs, for her, she doesn't have a big circle of friends and she doesn't want to. She's just not motivated by that. But maybe it's, hey, my one goal, I'd like to go to the gym 3 to 4 times a week with my one friend. Hey, that's a good goal. If that fills that bucket, if that's a 10 out of 10 for you, let's do that. Let's figure that out. What this also allows us to do is once we have a breakdown of those goals, we break them up into, a couple different categories. One might be, hey, these are monthly savings goals. For an example, I had an ISA who, for her, she has a lot of dietary restrictions. And one of her goals was to try out a box meal service that fit within all of her dietary restrictions and might take a little bit of pressure off of her at home of trying to, cook something for the family because her family doesn't have the same restrictions as her. Maybe it's taking a little bit of pressure off finding meals that everybody enjoys and fit within, her diet, and she can have those, right? So this might be a, hey, every single month, this is going to be expense. Let's add that to your bottom line. Okay. So we have this number. Another column might be one-time expenses. So that might be, what? I want to go on this vacation this year. I want to take a trip to Cancun, or I want to take a trip to, Ireland, or wherever it is you want to go. And I'm going to save it up and we're going to get there. So we're going to put that in the one-time category. I need to save X amount, and then once I get to this, then I'll spend it. A lot of different ways to skin that cat. And then the other one, and probably the most important, I think, is scheduled time. So for example, if you say, I want to go to the gym 3 to 4 times a week. Okay, where is that going to show up on your calendar? And that may mean that, for some of these goals, that might be time off work. That might be, hey, let's plan your vacation right now. Let's figure this out. Or let's figure out weekly what time you want to do X activity. And maybe it's, hey, I want to connect with somebody at the office. I want to take them out to coffee, once a week for an hour. Okay, let's figure it out. When is that hour? Let's get a list together. Let's figure out who you're taking, when you're going to take them. We get down to the granular level, all right? And this is really important because I think sometimes as leaders in the sales space, in real estate, we focus so much on the product that we lose sight of the process and the people. This is my gut check and how I'm able to get a really close lens on what's going on with my people day to day. Now, this doesn't replace a personal relationship, and I want to drive that home. But I think this is such a critical number and is such a critical set of metrics that are apart from our appointments and our calls and our texts to actually really get granular, and I think that's super important. So that is a 1,000 foot view, and I think I'm going to do a couple more additional videos and get a little more granular on a lot of these different parts. But let me know what questions you guys have, and until next time, thanks for being a member of Convert.